Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel. It's time for me to do my meta predictions for the Vancouver Regionals. That is going to be this weekend. Of course, Vancouver Regionals is this weekend. It is going to be the last ever E-Block tournament. So I thought I would give my opinions on what I think is going to happen this weekend for the meta at Vancouver with my meta predictions. Of course, a lot of cards are rotating, so I'm sure we're going to see potentially different meta shifts because of people wanting to play cards one last time before they leave the format. If you are new here to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We're on the road to 12,000 subs, and make sure to leave a like on the video. Let me know what your predictions for Vancouver's meta is in the comments down below. But let's get into the predictions. So, in my opinion, the best deck in the tournament, the best deck to beat, in my opinion, is going to be Gardevoir EX. I think Gardevoir is the best deck for Vancouver Regionals. It has all of the good things going for it. It's got good matchup spreads, and it seems to be like the big decks, right? A good Guardy player should have a good time against Giratina. You have a good matchup against Charizard, in my opinion. And, of course, you have a good Miraidon matchup. Those are three of the big decks you want to be beating. Now, if you're going to play Guardy, Turo is probably going to need to be within your deck. If you're not playing Turo, you're probably going to be losing to the Mawile, but I do think that Gardevoir is the best deck this weekend. I'm pretty sure a lot of players are going to be on Gardevoir. One last time. Also, keep in mind, Gardevoir is rotating the Shining Arcana, the Zacians, all that stuff are leaving. A lot of what makes this deck so good is leaving the format, and I'm sure a lot of people might want to give Gardevoir one last ride before it rotates out of the format. So, I do think Guardy is good. Of course, the Aiden Koos Lost Box deck is a close second. I am a huge fan of the Dragonite Kyogre deck. Honestly, looking at it, if I was going to Vancouver, I would probably have considered playing this deck because I think that Dragonite Kyogre is a very good play for Vancouver. It does seem to beat most of the decks in the format. The Mawile fixes a lot of your bad matchups against Guardian Charizard, and of course, having the Dragonite is really, really good. You have a good matchup against Tina. You have a good Guardy matchup if they don't play Turo. You have a good Zard matchup, in my opinion, with the Mawile. You might have to go back up to 2 Mawile if Zard this weekend does tech in Lost City again. So maybe it's correct to go up to 2 Mawile this weekend over the 1. But I do think you beat a lot of the big decks. You beat Tina. You can beat Guardy without a Turo. You can beat Charizard. You destroy Roaring Moon. You beat Chien-Pao. I think you can beat like almost anything. You're like a turbo deck. You can easily get to 10 of the Lost Zone really quickly. You can get turn 1 Mirage Gate, Dragonite. V is a very strong card this weekend. And of course, Kyogre is really good, especially if we do see a little bit of an uptick in Miraidon this weekend. Then there's a good reason to see Kyogre see success. And not to mention, Kyogre and Dragonite are both rotating. So if you want to play Kyogre, now is the time to play it for Vancouver because I think it is still a very good call and a good play for the Vancouver Regionals. And then, of course, we do have the Tina Lost Box deck. Tina is still going to be very popular this weekend. The deck is kind of no longer the BDIF, but it's still a very good deck that I think it's still going to be popular regardless. I think a lot of people are just very comfortable and very set on the deck itself. So that kind of lends it to just being a popular deck. It's just people are comfortable with it. People know to play it. It doesn't really have like any flat out bad matchups. So I do think your Guardy and Dragonite Kyogre matchup are unfavored. I do think that Tina is still a pretty good deck for this weekend. I think it's going to be popular just because people are just kind of comfortable with it, and they don't really know what to play for this last tournament, so they're just like, I'll just play the same Tina 60 that I've been playing to most of the regionals. And then, of course, Charizard, good old Charizard. Charizard has been falling off a little bit. I don't think Charizard is as good as it used to be. You do take pretty bad matchups to, like, Gardevoir. Obviously, your Tina matchup's never been fantastic. But you do have, like, okay matchups against stuff like Moon and Miraidon. One of the main selling points about playing Charizard this weekend in Vancouver is that Charizard has a good Miraidon matchup, and Miraidon might see a little bit more play this weekend, so there's a good reason to see Charizard see an uptick in play. Personally, I wouldn't play Charizard. I don't think the deck is that great, but I can still see Charizard seeing some success this weekend. It's probably going to get, like, top... I could see one maybe in, like, top 16. We haven't really seen Zard in top 8, I don't think, in a while. Well, I guess it did get top 8 at Charlotte, but still, I don't know if Charizard will get another top 8 at Vancouver. Probably can get a top 16 at best, if I'm going to be honest with you, because I think we have a higher chance of seeing Dragonite and Gardevoir in top 8 over Charizard. Even Tina will probably get top 8. And we got to talk about good old Roaring Moon. Now, I think the Roaring Moon deck with the catchers is very, very powerful. Moon seems to be one of the strongest decks in the format right now because it's fast, it's aggressive. The Pokemon catchers really do put the deck on another level, in my opinion. And I think that Roaring Moon is going to be very popular at Vancouver. I could see Moon being like potentially the third most played deck. It's going to be that popular in my opinion. It might be second or third most played deck. I ain't lying. Moon is really powerful, and it doesn't really like its worst matchup obviously is going to be like Gardevoir, and Dragonite Kyogre is an abysmal matchup, but theoretically you can beat almost anything. Like you're thinking about it like, oh, this deck has a bad matchup against, Gardevoir. It's got a good bad matchup against Charizard. You can still beat them by just making them go first and being able to like get a turn 1 knockout, and being able to aggressively play Pokemon catcher is also very important. So Moon is a really good play for this weekend still, because it's still going to be popular. It's going to be a popular deck. Whether or not you're somebody who's on Moon, Moon is going to be popular, and that's one reason to maybe play it. It's going to be popular. The Moon Mirror is kind of just, the Moon Mirror is fine, right? You just try to win the prize trade, basically. You bait the first Frenchie gouging and stuff if you can. Yeah, the Moon Mirror is definitely interesting, but yeah, Moon will be popular. It's definitely, I could see it getting top 8 again, to be honest. And then we got Control. So I do think that Snorlax is still going to be also played this weekend by some of the players who have been sticking with it. I don't think it's going to be a popular deck by any means, but Snorlax does have a chance of still being played by a lot of the players who have been consistently doing well with Snorlax this whole season, because Snorlax is still in a good spot. Even though Guardy's now playing Turo, I don't think it's that bad, because I think a good Snorlax player can adjust. Obviously, your Tina matchup isn't fantastic, and even though Charizard is starting to decline in popularity, it's still like a good matchup. The Pidgeot Snorlax deck does seem to be the one that had the most success in Europe the past couple weekends, but I do think that the more straightforward Snorlax deck is also very strong with the Rotom and the Mimikyu and stuff. No Pidgeot definitely could still be a good way to play it. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Snorlax sneak its way into top 8. It's definitely very possible. Then, of course, there is Miraidon. So one of the big stories this weekend is Miraidon may make a big comeback in the format. Miraidon's been kind of wavering a little bit. It's still been getting okay results, but it has been falling off. We haven't really seen a Miraidon in top 8 in a while, I don't think. But Miraidon could come back this weekend with Gardevoir looking pretty good for Vancouver. And with Charizard on the decline, Miraidon could be in a good spot to make its comeback. Now, Miraidon does have to watch out for stuff like Giratina. Giratina's never been a great matchup. Obviously, there's Roaring Moon could probably be... I mean, I think Roaring Moon is kind of like one of those matchups where you basically, whoever takes first 2 prize KO wins the game. And then your worst matchup by far is Charizard, where Charizard is starting to fall off a little bit. I don't even think your Dragonite matchup is that bad, because, to be fair, if you turn 1 Iron Hands the Dragonite deck, they're forced to Dragonite you, and if they don't, you're probably winning that game, even though they do have Kyogre. But if you can attack twice with Iron Hands in that matchup, you probably win it. But yeah, Miraidon does seem to be a play this weekend that I think a lot of players are looking at, and it might make a comeback. I personally had Miraidon on my list of things I would have brought to Vancouver had I gone to Vancouver, because I do think Miraidon is going to see a bit of an uptick in play due to like the popularity of Gardevoir and even Roaring Moon, which Miraidon, I think, does have a fine matchup against. I think the Peony build is still the best way to play Miraidon, but I do know that the more supporter-heavy build of Research, Iono, and Path does still seem to be another good way to play it. Both builds, I think, have their ups and downs, for sure. I think that Peony Miraidon tends to have a little bit of a brickier game. It loses more to like prizing Squawkabilly. You have worse luck into Iono, but the Judge build and the Research build does have more chances of like being more consistent, but you just have less energy, so your generators might not hit as easily. Whereas the Peony build, because you're guaranteeing 2 generators at a time, you're almost like guaranteed to constantly attack every turn. But I will say, though, I have seen some builds of like the Research Iono Judge build with Path playing 1 or 2 copies of Peony, so that's something you could look into doing. This is just a sample list here that I got from one of the most recent tournaments, but there's definitely more ways to tweak around with the deck. Like, you probably don't need to play Drapion. I think Spiritomb is actually like a must-have in the deck to handle the Roaring Moon matchup a little bit easier. All right, Chien-Pao. Good old Chien-Pao. Chien-Pao's been making that comeback in the meta, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Chien-Pao have another decent run in Vancouver. Probably a deck that can get top 16. I don't think Chien-Pao is the greatest deck right now, though, in all honesty, with, like, the Dragonite deck. Gardevoir is, like, maybe your only matchup you're, like, looking into maybe beating. But if Gardevoir's going back to, like, double Avery now, then it's probably bad news for Chien-Pao for sure. Chien-Pao is just kind of one of those decks where, I mean, if you play it, you're probably you can do well with it, but I can't see Chien-Pao getting more than, like, a top 16 this weekend, unfortunately. And then, of course, Mew Vmax. This is Mew Vmax's last ever big tournament, and there's a good chance a lot of players are going to play Mew because it's going to be the last time you get to play it. And to be fair, now that it just won the Utrecht special event, it's actually got like a decent list. It beat Roaring Moon in the finals. Mew is looking like actually not that bad, even though Moon is popular and Moon is going to be very popular this weekend. Mew still seems to be in an okay spot. I think a lot of players are kind of thinking on that, like, well, Mew is this is the last time we can play Mew. Mew isn't in a terrible spot where we're going to go ahead and play it. I'm going to put out a bit of a wild card prediction. There's a good chance we could see a Mew VMAX in top 8 at Vancouver Regionals. I'm going to put that bold prediction out right now. I think it is possible. Mew can definitely prey on the popularity of stuff like Miraidon coming back. The only issue is obviously your Moon matchup, you can beat it thanks to the fusion build, but obviously, Moon can still be tough. I think the big story is how can Mew handle Gardevoir and Dragonite Kyogre. Those seem like bad matchups. Dragonite is obviously not a great matchup because they can easily Kyogre you. They just basically throw one-prizers at you the entire game, and it's very difficult for Mew to beat Kyogre, in my opinion, unless Mew techs for Kyogre, which I don't know if Mew should tech for Kyogre. But I do think that we are going to see Mew this weekend perform well. It might be like, I think it'll be definitely like top 6 most played deck for sure. I think that the fusion build is better than DTE by far. But then, of course, we have the Lost Box decks to talk about here. The Lost Box archetypes that aren't using the Dragonite. We do have more of a Paradox-focused build here with the Kyogre. I do think if you're playing Lost Box this weekend, I do think you probably should at least be playing Kyogre just because of Moon and Miraidon, Mew VMAX, stuff like that. Yeah, I think if you're going to play Lost Box, you probably have to play the Kyogre. We do have the Paradox build. I mean, I know it has a Dragonite in it, but we have been seeing some Kyogre lists using Roaring Moon and Iron Hands over the Dragonite combo, which isn't terrible. Iron Hands is still a very strong card to have in the Lost Zone deck. The Moon isn't bad either. Does help a little bit more against Charizard, obviously. And then we do have the Glasses Lost Box deck, one of the sleeper decks in the format, in my opinion. We did see Glasses Box get a top 32 at the Knoxville Regionals, and it definitely seems like it's a deck that isn't, like, thought about very much. I don't think it's in a bad spot right now. I mean, Glasses Lost Box isn't a bad deck. I actually don't think its matchup against Guardy is as bad as people give it credit for, because you do have Iron Hands, but you also have a good amount of one-prizers. Cramorant and Tropius are really good against Gardevoir, and of course, you do have Moon and Moltres, which are all still very good to have against Gardevoir. So I don't think that Glasses Box has a bad Guardy matchup. And yeah, I think it's actually a decent deck. I kind of want to see one get like another top 32 this weekend. I like this deck. I've played it myself. It's a very fun deck to play, and I actually do think it's in a decent spot still in our meta. And then Sablezard, the the deck that can do well, but nobody ever talks about. Now, Sablezard isn't in a bad spot this weekend, though if you're playing it, you probably have to play Mawile in the deck in order to have a chance against Gardevoir. That's really this deck's hardest matchup is Gardevoir. You could play the Roaring Moon in the deck, so you could play the Moonzard build, which might help a little bit more against Gardevoir. But yeah, Sablezard definitely is a deck that we could probably see get another, like, maybe a top 16 at best. It's a deck that, it will see play. It's not in a terrible spot this weekend. I think that it has a good matchup into the Dragonite Kyogre deck. So there is that, and yeah, we'll have to see how it does. And then Arc Piles. So Arc definitely seems to be in an interesting spot right now, mainly because it's a cool deck. It theoretically can do a lot, right? Being able to, like, use Judge Path is really good. The main issue with Arc Piles right now is the Moon matchup seems to be abysmal. Like, your Roaring Moon matchup, in my opinion, is very, very bad. Even if you go first, get a turn 1 path to peek and play, I mean, if they just get out of the path, you probably lose. It's especially now that they're playing Pokemon catchers. Being able to, like, start with, like, a Bidoof or something is, like, decent, because you can, like, go Bidoof, Arceus, and then hope that your opponent doesn't rip a catcher. But now that they have catchers, they can easily just catcher, turn 1 Calamity Storm, knock out your Arceus V, and it's so hard to win the game at that point. I've seen some Arc decks try to adjust to the Moon matchup by playing more one-prize attackers like Radiant Charizard or Elekid, but I don't know if it's enough, man. We'll have to see how Arceus performs. I would personally be very scared of playing Arceus this weekend just because of how popular Moon is, and even if Miraidon starts to come back in the meta, which I think is also a matchup Arc can tend to struggle against, I would also be a little scared against that too. But we'll have to see how Arceus does. I think there will be some Arc players in Day 2. It's just a deck that always will get Day 2. And then, of course, we got Rapid Strike, also Rapid Strike's last ever tournament. But crazy thing about Rapid Strike, it has fallen off. It used to be like considered one of the best decks for like the San Antonio regionals, but now at the end of the format, it has fallen off completely, though I don't think it is all but gone yet. Rapid Strike does have a good matchup against the Dragonite Kyogre deck. You also have a good matchup into Tina, I think, and you even have a good matchup into Gardy if they're not playing the Moonlit Hill Stadium. I think Turo might complicate things, though, but I do think that Rapid Strike is still going to have a run this weekend. Somebody's going to play it. Somebody's probably going to get like top 32 at best with it. Playing it one last time before the engine rotates. The big thing Rapid Strike does need to worry about, obviously, is Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon is a very tough matchup for this deck, but other than that, I think this deck, honestly, could still get a run. I just don't think that enough players are playing it. That's probably what it is, but I don't think Rapid Strike is in a bad spot this weekend. Honestly, with, like, the two top decks right now, Gardy and Kyogre, it's honestly not a bad spot, considering those matchups can definitely be favorable for the Rapid Strike deck. And then Entei Valiant, another like sleeper deck in the format right now. I don't know if Entei Valiant's going to have another top 8 run like it did in Knoxville. It could have like another top 32 run. Entei Valiant's just perfectly fine right now. It's an okay deck. I don't know if your matchup against Kyogre's great. Your Guardy matchup I think is okay too. So I don't know. We'll have to see how Entei Valiant does. I don't think it's a deck anyone like really expects to see do well. Would it be better than playing Rapid Strike, though? If you're going to play one of these like damage spread decks, which one would you rather play? Would it be Rapid Strike or Entei Valiant? I don't know. I maybe would prefer Entei over Rapid Strike. So another issue with Rapid Strike is if players decide to play Mew this weekend, that's obviously going to be bad for Rapid Strike, right? Because that's one of Rapid Strike's bad matchups. I think Entei Valiant, especially with Spiritomb, actually doesn't have a bad Mew matchup because you do have a lot of you can put on a lot of pressure against Mew because the Enteis can actually threaten the Genesects pretty easily, and you also even have Radiant Charizard, which can actually be decent into Mew Vmax if you can set up damage with the Iron Valiant. Palkia, Goldengo, my favorite. Now, Goldengo, I don't think is in a bad spot this weekend. The worst thing about playing Goldengo is just you have a bad Gardevoir matchup, but you actually probably have okay matchups across the board. Obviously, your Zard matchup's not bad, your Tina matchup's decent, and I also think that your matchup into the Dragonite Kyogre deck isn't bad either. It comes down to whether or not you can evolve your Gimme Ghouls before they get to Sableye, because if I'm playing Dragonite Kyogre against Goldengo, my objective is going to be to try to get Sableye quick as possible so I can take out your Gimme Ghouls. But I do think that Goldengo is still in an okay spot this weekend. It's not a bad play. It's more of a for fun deck, I think, at this point. Like, it's not going to be a meta deck, but or it is a meta deck, but it's not like a super great meta deck. It's a deck that'll be for fun, right? Could see another one get top 32. I think it's entirely possible. It's really not the worst play. Now, Lugia. I wanted to kind of give an honorable meme mention to Lugia here. Lugia definitely is a deck that maybe somebody might play this weekend. I know there's the colorless build of Lugia, which before Vancouver has been kind of getting a bit of a resurgence in some play, so maybe we'll see a Lugia in day 2. I mean, there's always a chance we could see something like a Lugia get day 2. It's not going to be a play deck, like no one's really going to play it. It's probably going to be one in day 2, but it is entirely possible. Then we got the Palkia deck. Now, Palkia did do well at one of the most recent tournaments in Brazil, so I wanted to highlight that real quick. Will Palkia be good in Vancouver? I don't know. We'll have to see. I guess having the Vulpix does help against Gardy, which is one of Palkia's harder matchups. Even, of course, with Cologne Cross Switcher, Gardevoir can still be a difficult matchup for you. So Vulpix maybe is how you try to fix that Gardy matchup. And then, of course, you do have some decent matchups across the board. I mean, the Vulpix will help, too, against Charizard, which is nice, which is another matchup that I don't think is great. I don't know. We'll have to see how Palkia does. There could be another one in day 2 for sure. I can definitely see another Palkia in day 2. And then, of course, I want to talk about Klawf real quick. Klawf is a big meme deck. But if anyone wants to play Klawf this weekend, it is not the worst play. You have a bad Gardy matchup, but I mean, other than that, your matchups probably aren't too bad. I think your matchup into, Roaring Moon should be good. Your Miraidon matchup is pretty fantastic. Those are two decks that should probably see a lot of play this weekend, right? So playing Klawf isn't a bad idea. If anyone's going to play Klawf this weekend, honestly, this could be the time. I mean, Klawf does lose Spicy Season Curry, so the deck does get worth of the rotation. So if you're somebody who's been an avid Klawf enjoyer the entire format, this is a great time to rip out Klawf one last time here before rotation, because it's honestly not in a bad spot if both Moon and Miraidon see play. And of course, you might end up hitting a couple Charizards along the way, which isn't a bad matchup. But apparently this deck beats Tina too. I have yet to believe that, but apparently Klawf beats Tina. All right, now I want to throw a couple wild card predictions out there for some rogue decks. The first one is going to be the Bayonet deck. Now, I actually think that the Bayonet deck is better than people give it credit for. From what I've seen and what I've played against this deck before, it's kind of a scary deck. It can be pretty difficult. Obviously, a lot of decks do rely very heavily on item cards. It can be a sneaky good deck. So, honestly, I would like to see somebody get day 2 with that Bayonet EX deck. I think it'd be really cool to see, and I have that as one of my wild card predictions here. And then I do have another wildcard prediction. My good old friend Zorobox, my favorite deck that is rotating. I want to see somebody get day 2 with Zorobox. It's honestly possible. The meta is perfectly fine for it. Miraidon, Roaring Moon, Charizard are all fine matchups for the deck. Obviously, you're going to have to worry about maybe Gardevoir with double Avery. I think your Dragonite matchup might be a little shaky. Actually, no. You know what? Dragonite's not even that bad of a matchup. I guess you have to probably play a Pokemon that can do 240 damage to beat the Dragonite. But I want to see a Zorobox get day 2. It's really not in a bad spot in this meta. Zorobox has a great moon matchup, especially if they're not playing Water Energy. It has a great matchup against, in my opinion, Zard. Fantastic. Miraidon isn't terrible as long as you can immediately cleaver them after they go hands against you. Your Tina matchup I've never thought was very bad either. Even if Tina's playing Avery, I still think your Tina matchup is honestly fine. I think that Zorobox is, if you're going to play it, before it rotates, this is actually not a bad tournament to play Zorobox one last time. I want to see a Zorobox in day 2 before it goes. Arc Rayquaza Armarouge. So I've heard some ramblings about Arc Armarouge in our meta. Not even the post-rotation, just right now. I've heard some talk of Arc Armarouge. The Rayquaza build has been the one that I wanted to highlight, mainly because Rayquaza is rotating. It'd be cool to see Rayquaza get day 2 one last time before it rotates out of the standard format. But I do want to highlight the Arc Armarouge archetype in general. It is a deck that I've heard some rumblings about. If it could get a day 2 at the Vancouver Regionals, that could be pretty cool. And finally, we have the Tord Charizard deck. Now, I wanted to highlight this real quick. Tord in his Charizard deck. Is anyone going to play it to Vancouver? Is anyone going to get day 2 with it? Now, obviously, a lot of people look at this deck oh, this deck sucks. But then some people look at it oh, this deck's actually better than people give it credit for. If somebody actually has been playing this deck and testing it all this time since Tord played it and is very serious about bringing it to Vancouver, if this gets day 2, that'd be very cool. That's my other last wildcard prediction is can the Tord Charizard deck get day 2 at the Vancouver Regionals? Or is it just going to be a one-time thing where Tord played it and just because Tord played it, it got a good placement? Or can somebody else play it and get a day 2 at Vancouver with it? That's the other wild card prediction that I wanted to lay out on the table. But there you go. Those are my predictions. If I had to predict what can win the tournament, in my opinion, the deck that has the highest odds of winning the tournament is either Dragonite Kyogre or Gardevoir. I mean, the two best decks, statistically have the best chance of winning the tournament, but I do think that these two are just clearly going to be the best decks in the room, and if any deck's going to win the tournament, I think it's going to be one of these two. There's always a chance something weird will win the tournament, or, something random like Charizard could win the tournament, Giratina could win again, Moon could win the tournament. I mean, Moon did almost win Utrecht, so I will have to see, but my best predictions for what can win is probably either just Gardevoir or Dragonite Kyogre. I think these two decks are the two best decks that have a good chance of winning the entire tournament. I think we're going to definitely see a Guardy and a Dragonite deck in top 8 regardless. Probably going to see a Moon in top 8, maybe a Charizard. I think we'll be at least one Charizard in top 16. We might see a Miraidon in top 8 too. There's a good chance Miraidon might get top 8. Those are my predictions. And of course, let me know what you think of my predictions down below. What are your predictions for Vancouver? Are you going to Vancouver this weekend? I'm going to probably be watching it and all that stuff. I know I'll be making content on the new set and stuff, but still probably going to tune in and try to watch the Vancouver Regionals. I'm excited for it, and I'm excited to see what does well this weekend. Thanks for watching the video. If y'all are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below. And if you enjoyed today's video, leave a like and all that good stuff, and I'll catch you on another video. Bye-bye.